So welcome, Mr. Han. Thank you for participating during our interview. We have some categories of questions. Firstly, some general questions. After that, questions about the minor. And last but not least, some personal questions. But firstly, we want to start with the question, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. I think by now, I suppose many of us are just working mostly in front of the screen. So good in terms of as good as it can be, I suppose. There's a lot to say about the flexibility that comes with it, but obviously, I mean, I'm also missing the social contact, etc. So yeah, so far so okay, I suppose.
Okay, great. And we were also wondering why you wanted to participate in our interview, because you gave us a guest lecture, of course. But yeah, do you think it's important to participate in this interview?
Okay, that's an interesting question. After being invited for an interview, and then yeah, I do think, generally speaking, I mean, I see myself as someone who hopefully is able to bring some perspective to the people I talk to. And as the professor, for instance, at Zuyd, I do believe that my primary customer or the people who I'm interested in most in their development are the students, before anyone else.
Yeah.
And so I do find it important that that I get opportunities to connect also with the students, because it's a two-way street. For me, it's not only me sharing my wisdom and experience or whatever, but it's also about me finding out, okay, so what are the questions that nowadays students deal with, and where is it taking whatever I will be doing in the future as well, right? Because obviously my task is also to stay relevant to not only industry and education and vision and whatever, yeah, sure, but also staying relevant to our customers, who are the students, of course.
Yes.
So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Right.
We meant why you said yes for it, because of course we invited you, but we're really glad that you're here with us.
We would like to go some days back in the time. I would like to go to your student life for a moment. What did you study, and what was your goal within this study?
Okay. As a student, my student life actually started in Germany, and that was back in 2006. And I started studying economics in Germany at the University of Mannheim, which I completely failed, and I completely messed it up. And I actually started economics because back then, after high school, I wasn't quite sure in which direction I'm going to go. Eventually, I thought I might move into hotel business and hotel management, but then, yeah, for me it was more about, okay, so what can I study that keeps most of the doors open for me in case I change my mind in the future. So economics and business administration was certainly one of the things that I thought was generic enough to go into whichever specialization that I'm thinking about in the future. But having said that, I mean, after studying economics over there, I immediately found that it was not my thing. It was just, for me at least, it was too dry. I also didn't have an economics background from high school, so everything was fairly new with the whole supply demand and all that. So I didn't connect with the topic. So what I ended up in was to start a full-time career in online poker. And I was playing online poker basically to make a living back then, and became an online poker coach for the Korean community back then. And then I started hotel management in Sydney in 2008 with the intention to, after graduating, move to casinos. But then actually after starting the hospitality education, I immediately fell in love with F&B. And since then, I've just been basically focused on F&B, and all my work experiences in F&B from that moment onwards. So yeah, I started in Sydney, continued my studies halfway through in Switzerland, because I was lucky enough that there was a partner institute in Switzerland from which I could then continue my studies in, which is also a personal decision to move to Switzerland because my parents live in Germany. So I wanted to be kind of, after Australia, a bit closer to my parents again. And yeah, afterwards, with, again, a bit of a different move. So after I finished my undergraduate, I did a PhD in technology, right? Technology in tourism and wider service sector. But that was a move that came also after some discussion with the professors that I was working with back then. Basically, we're discussing, okay, so is there an opportunity for a PhD in the food and beverage area? And back then their argument was, well, if you want to move into business administration later, then to move into food, the only option, or the only kind of reasonable option, would be to move into food science. And that's an area that I didn't really want to move into. I wanted to stay in the food kind of management perspective and management area. So yeah, in the end, after a lot of discussion, we decided that I would do a PhD in technology, which is my second passion in a way, and particularly look into augmented reality at that point, which was by then still unknown basically in the consumer market. So yeah, that was very interesting and exciting field that I'm still involved in right now.
Okay, and was hospitality also important during your study, or was it something that came later?
What do you mean hospitality? Because I studied hospitality management. So
I mean, like the importance of hospitality. Was it already something from the beginning, or
okay, yeah.
later on?
So the essence of hospitality, I definitely think that has had a profound impact on my life.
Yeah.
Simply because, in the end of the day, I think hospitality, for me at least, in simple words, is about how do I make people feel comfortable with what they're doing, with where they're at, with the people they are surrounded with, etc. And that for me is the essence of hospitality. And so that is something that I see over and over again in my personal life as well, where I find people who have a bit of the kind of hospitality character in a way are much more able to connect to people, and for me the social connection has opened so many doors in my life, right? In terms of the direction that I then took as well, and so it has opened so many opportunities in the end. But it has always started with a relationship with someone, with that was acquired through kind of being hospitable and being comfortable around people, and hopefully that person also feeling comfortable to further work with me, obviously. So yes, it's definitely very important to contribute to where I am now.
Yeah. And what are the major learning points related to your field of interest? That's a difficult one.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean with learning points. So what are the kind of key milestones that I had, or
maybe just the most important learning points, during your study.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's something to say about, I mean, obviously with what I just mentioned earlier, the value of relationships, for sure, because that's something that I think needs balance. And what needs balance is, I think, the value you put on relationships and the energy and time you spend on that, as well as the value and energy you spend on results and productivity, right? I'm by nature more of a rational thinking person, a rational decision maker. Perhaps because of my roots in Germany, I don't know. But I find myself that has certainly driven me towards a specific goal and being very goal oriented. But more recently, I also realized that this kind of approach has led me to have a bit of an unbalance to being too much result oriented, that I forget about the well-being of other people, actually, right? And I think there are also people who go completely the opposite, who take care of the people and everything's fine with the people, but then results are hardly ever on time, let's say, right? So I think that there's an important balance, especially if you're working in the hospitality business. At the end of the day, that's a people business, right? So,
Yeah.
But business is a business, so you do need to worry about your kind of outcomes as well, right? So I think in that regard, it's important to have that balance there. That's something that I definitely realized in the past years. Something else that has been really valuable to my life is the different perspectives that I've gained by living in different countries, right? So with the excuse of studying, I luckily had the opportunity to live in different countries, and that has really opened my perspective towards the world, towards how people think, how people solve certain problems, and that is different. And understanding the culture, you then really understand why people behave that way, right? And by understanding that, you're much better able to actually communicate and work with the people because you understand where they're coming from, right? And so that has been very interesting for me when I went to China, actually. I was living for a year in China after my undergraduate, in Beijing, to be more precise. And basically, my intention was to live there to learn about their culture, learn the language, because it was back then starting to develop as such an economic power or powerhouse that I thought, well, eventually I will get in contact with Chinese people. Also because of the mere mass of Chinese people out there, that it's definitely beneficial for me to know about the culture and speak the language. And so I went there, and I have to be honest. Before going to China, I had a very very one-sided image of Chinese people and their culture, right? Very one-sided. Another way you can also say very ignorant image of Chinese people, perhaps. And so when I went there and I lived actually in the environment and I kind of immersed myself in the world that Chinese people are living in, only then I actually understood what, causes the types of kind of stereotypical behavior that I had in my mind.
Yeah.
Right? For me, it was just like Chinese people. But afterwards, I really understood, okay, that's part of the culture and that's part of the context they grow up in. And therefore, it results in this type of behavior. And really an eye-opener for me was by the time I got towards the end of the year, I started more and more to behave also to so adjust to the Chinese culture that I was behaving more and more like a Chinese person as well. So when I then came outside of the country, I was the unique person basically, because I was behaving differently to my German friends, for instance, right? So that really opened my eyes as well in terms of the cultural awareness, but also the importance to not only in theory understand what people are doing, and you probably heard of different kind of cultural theories, etc., and models and whatnot. Hofstede or something, I think. But everyone has done that before. But to really immerse yourself also into their world, to really understand where they're coming from, and that's particularly interesting or important for someone who's doing consumer research, right? If I don't understand where the consumer is coming from, then I can read about the consumer all I want. I will never be able to actually address the issues that I need to address.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, and you gave us a guest lecture, of course. But what do you think about the minor horizons in hospitality? And what do you think we will learn the most from, for example?
I think and I have to be honest, in my limited knowledge of the minor, I think what I appreciate the most is probably that the minor is really trying to open your eyes to more than just hotel.
Yeah.
Right? And that is something that I find very important to also kind of open this world to you guys, because as a matter of fact, I mean, we can see in our student numbers or alumni numbers that there's only actually a smaller and smaller fraction of people ending up in hotels and staying there, right?
Yeah.
Many perhaps start there, but then after just a couple of years, they move to other sectors, right? For different reasons. And I think it's also important to realize, or to make you realize, that the opportunities that are out there that are beyond hotels, right? And beyond kind of, I don't know, the either family-run business or multinational hotels. Because there's a lot that is going on around that, right? Where you have really value and can contribute to by having studied a people management subject in a way, right? And so that kind of opportunity, I think, is very important, and the realization of that is very important in order to simply increase or maximize your playground that you will have after you graduate, right?
Yeah. And during the minor, we do have a lot of interesting guest lectures. But why do you think it is so important to proceed with guest lectures?
Yeah, to be honest with you, that's an interesting question because I'm personally not a fan of guest lectures. So,
why not?
No, let me tell you why. Well, first off, I think it's important to speak to the people that are coming as guest lecturers, right? And that's simply, I think, an opportunity to hear about someone very often from the industry, or maybe in my case from a slightly different area, to give you perspective on what is going on right now, what are the questions they're dealing with right now, what are the developments right now out there that you will probably see as you kind of graduate and move into the industry. So to I think have that bridge to people who have experience in that field and can tell you something from another perspective is definitely very valuable, right? So I do think it's important to connect with those people, right? What I appreciate less perhaps, and that's why I'm saying why I'm not a big fan of guest lectures, is that this conversation is very one-sided, right? So it's more of a format issue for me rather than the person, him or herself, right?
Yeah.
Because I really do think you should connect and talk to those people, but I think I would appreciate more of a two-way format, right? And for me, the real value comes not from you listening to what I have to say, but the real value comes from us discussing a topic together, right? And to really debating the topic. Okay, this is why I see it from this way, right?
Yeah.
And from you also contributing and understanding and shaping this together. That is really for me where the value comes in. And so a format that would encourage that, like a debate or discussion or like the workshop format where we can work together.
Yeah.
That is really what I would see as an ideal setup.
A little bit more interactive.
Yeah, it's more like a co-creating process.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rather than listening and passive consumption of information or content, basically.
And was it also more difficult for you to make the guest lecture interesting or make sure that everyone paid attention because now everything is online? So
yeah. Well, if I speak, I just assume everyone is paying attention. No, I'm just kidding. Now, yeah, it certainly has its limitations, I think, online, because I also much more prefer to just talk to people, in an offline or personally, because I think in terms of communication, there's a lot more that we communicate through also our body language, through different kind of eye contact and stuff like that, than whatever I am able to communicate verbally, right? And sure, I can show you some PowerPoint slides, etc. But in the end of the day, it's dynamics and the dynamics and the atmosphere of that interaction that is, it's slightly different, right? Offline and online.
Yeah.
So I think in the offline setting, I can imagine that the kind of interaction would be much easier to accomplish, right? Without having the feeling whenever I want to ask something, I'm kind of put on the spot here, right? And I cannot just casually ask a question or whatever, right? So I think it has more of a perhaps psychological effect rather than the process in itself. Because I think the story that I need to tell, I can definitely tell online as well. That's not the issue.
Yeah.
But I think psychologically, it just does something to the participation, right, in the discussion. If you are, have the screen in front of us instead of real people.
Yeah. Yeah, and we thought your guest lecture is very interesting for all the minors in our school. But why did you start teaching in this minor and not, for example, in other minors like the food service or?
Yeah, I did have the guest lecture actually in the minor of gastronomy before.
Oh yeah.
But that was actually around the same time where Sylvia, the kind of lead of the minor in gastronomy, and Nicole Smith both contacted me for like a guest lecture in the minor. So I thought, okay, I changed the content slightly to make it a bit more relevant. But I thought this kind of topic is interesting for both, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so when it comes to food service, yes, again, I would change probably some of the use cases and examples that I show. but overall the story and the intention between the guest lecture for me was to not necessarily tell you what is right or how things are going right now, but through the insight of giving you a perspective on what is happening right now, really to encourage you to ask more questions about where this is going, right? And this was really the intention behind the guest lecture. It's not about having to tell you which direction you need to go, because that's something that I truly believe you have to decide for yourself. But what I can be of service to you is to help you ask relevant questions, right? And that's kind of where I see my role basically as a guest lecturer. And I agree. I think this might be also relevant for other students and other minors.
Yeah. And besides the guest lecture, we also saw on the social media pages of the school that you're now a professor on the future of food at school. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. Yeah, I mean that's actually why I joined Zuyd as a professor here for the research center. Yeah, I mean for me personally, this is the ideal job, right? So finally, I'm able to combine my passion in food and beverage with my passion in technology, and then bring it to one table basically by doing research around it, by having the luxury that I can set it up from scratch, right? Because there's a certain vision that I have and that other people also might have on how I think education should be organized, and how I think education needs to be differently organized compared to what I had as a student, because simply we live in different times, right? And so we have to adjust to those times, and we have to think about what is it that what is the mindset, and what is the kind of attitude in how you approach things, what I would like you to do once you go out there in this industry, right? Because for me it's really an opportunity to be able to encourage the next generation and be able to give them the tools and the kind of skill set, in a way to develop the skill set in order to actually develop our industry and move it forward, right? And to do that, I mean, I think we have to get out of, okay, this is what hotel managers do, this is what GMs do, and you can expect to go out there and do exactly the same thing. That's not true anymore, right? And it's really more about, is what we are doing right now actually the right way to do it, right? And really questioning the status quo in order to move and push innovation and development, right? So with this position, I'm really thankful actually that I have the opportunity here to contribute to Maastricht. And then also because I have the luxury to combine that with my role in Breda, where I'm also working part-time, simply because both schools have a very good relationship on a personal basis, and now also more officially, I think through bridging, through my bridging to this professorship.
Okay, and we have some questions about technology and future. What do you think are the dangers around technology and the interesting power of companies that have massive amount of data?
I think one of the risks, and I'm not sure if I would call it risk, but certainly that could be a pitfall, is the handling of data and the ownership of data, because I think it's already for a while there's a huge pool of data available online, and people on a daily or minute basis or second basis throw up all kinds of stuff about their personal lives and their consumption pattern and their life pattern and their family connections and all that kind of stuff online, basically for everyone to access, right? And I think if you have followed the trend on what that does to people, I think there's certainly more and more people who feel more comfortable with sharing their very private and personal things and information online. And there's another kind of party of people that is more aware of how mishandled, unfortunately, sometimes data is also, and what companies do with it. So I think there are two kind of poles that are being developed right now.
Yeah.
And one of the risks is definitely going to be consumers on a daily basis, or the majority, I would say, of consumers don't understand it well enough, right? In terms of how data is being produced, how data is being collected, and how data is being stored and handled, right? And as a result, we often find ourselves into very surprising situations when I'm talking to my wife about something in the car, and then I open my phone, and then all of a sudden an advertisement for exactly this product appears on my Twitter account, right? And so those kind of things are just, does it feel a bit strange, right? And to have, in a way, and some people call it spying, some people call it constant monitoring or whatever of technology and algorithms collecting our data. I think the risk is, or risk comes when consumers lose track of their own data and what they actually do online and the effects of that, right? Because we can see definitely a tendency of multinational companies, of those big data companies like Facebook, Google, Apple partly as well, making more and more an effort to enter actually people's private homes, right? Through smart technology, right? Through smart kitchens, smart TVs, smart vacuum cleaners, smart whatever, right? Everything is smart nowadays. And so we don't have this barrier anymore where I have my safety and privacy when I'm at home, right? Because now it's so kind of transparent what I do at home, when I come home, right? What I do with my children, what they are watching, what kind of food I'm eating, that basically I built this whole digital profile of myself in the online world that now companies can basically chip away on and just eat away by supposedly making my life better or more personalized. And so that's somewhere where I see also the danger when it comes to, okay, so how much is really in our own power then, right? In order to decide what I want and what I don't want, right? And then there's an interesting discussion, for instance, when it comes to food in our research center, because there's definitely something good to say about, well, sometimes artificial intelligence, algorithms make better decisions for me than I would for myself, right? For instance, I can definitely see an argument saying, well, I would rather have an algorithm decide what I need to eat today rather than myself going to the next kebab shop and purchasing that, right? So what is really important? Is it my physical well-being, which the algorithm decides much better than I do? Or is it about what I enjoy and what I want truly in that moment, right? And so those kind of debates, I think, open very interesting avenues for discussion.
Yeah, it does. And for example, what do you think about jobs that may be eliminated in the future? So, for example, in the hospitality industry, where humans are related, can technology, for example, take that over, or will there still be human interaction?
Yeah, I think what we can see with the use of technology is that I believe more and more kind of operational things can be taken over by technology, right? More and more things that are mainstream. Like, I mean, you don't always need the senior manager to be there to carry one plate from the kitchen to the table, right? You don't always need the head of housekeeping to check everything when we have like robots cleaning all the rooms, right, for instance. But the same goes for back of house. You don't always need a revenue manager if there's an algorithm who can calculate and estimate and make the prices much better than a revenue manager could, right? And so I think the jobs that are very much streamlined are the ones that will be replaced by technology first, I think, if there is a replacement. Yeah, the argument that I always kind of hear and read about is, well, technology doesn't have that emotional intelligence that people have, right? There's certainly some truth to that. On the other hand, the way technology is developing right now, and was that Watson, the artificial intelligence for IBM, or there was another artificial intelligence chatbot basically that was tested a few years ago. I think it was by Google actually. That basically had an algorithm that was learning from data, right? So it didn't have an established data set to use basically to kind of interact, but basically it would learn by itself the more people communicate with it and the more people kind of give input in a way, right, to that intelligence. And basically what was found is obviously there are then some people that just do stupid things with a bot, and then some people who do a very inappropriate comments and throw all kinds of messy stuff at it, that more and more the algorithm or the AI and chatbot developed to be really kind of racist and really problematic, establish a problematic character because of all that rubbish input that it got basically, right? So of no fault of the actual algorithm itself, it basically works, but because of the input that was so skewed, right?
Yeah.
And so I think also with the emotional intelligence, yeah, the question is, okay, well, what do you need it for, right? Do I need emotional intelligence in order to perform my job, right? If my job is to be a revenue manager, for instance, perhaps emotional intelligence doesn't really matter, right? If it's something where I really want to make people feel certain things and want to draw out certain feelings of happiness, joy, of pleasure, of excitement, of anger, perhaps of sadness, then perhaps I can make the argument, okay, that's going to take much longer for any robot or AI to actually be able to produce, right, or
Like
interact with.
manager or something.
Sorry, say again?
Like a food and beverage manager or something.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. I think it depends on how you define the role of a food and beverage manager, because arguably it's someone who makes sure the restaurant runs and makes profit, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of very shallow or very process-oriented task, I think, could also be done by technology. But if you think, okay, there's much more in the role of being a manager, you also have to be a leader, you have to be inspiring, you have to be motivating, you have to build a community with your team, et cetera, then I think we're moving into those kind of softer areas that are perhaps a bit more difficult for technology to take over. And that's perhaps where I would see the value for now of people.
And to end this whole interview, we have just a last question for you. And that is, what is your definition of broaden your horizons?
I think, yeah, that's a good question, because I'm just trying to think how I should structure my answer. Because definitely, I think there's something to say for broaden your horizons in terms of the knowledge that you have, right? And what I definitely think is important is that also in the knowledge and the information that you're consuming, in the kind of arguments that you're reading about, et cetera, it's important to broaden your horizons, to take a different stance as well, or be able to empathize and then take a different opinion, right? And I think that is something that is not being developed enough right now, at least for my taste, to really offer opportunities to students in form of, for instance, debates or things like that, where you're simply allowed to take a different or very strong opinion on something, right? Yeah. And I think nowadays we're kind of in a society where we always have to worry about political correctness and make sure no one is hurt by what I say and all that kind of nonsense. Yeah. That people are almost afraid to actually take a clear stance towards something, right? It's more like, it depends, right? And we always get those kind of wishy-washy answers, right? Yeah. Is it yes or no? Is it black or white, right? And I think broadening your horizons means that you obviously you know not encouraged to hurt other people's feelings, but be able to empathize or understand other people's perspectives by being able to become a better critical thinker, for instance, on a certain topic, being able to take different angles on different topics, right? And like that, simply helping you to make better decisions, right? Simply because you understand this topic matter from a much wider angle, like a 360-degree view, rather than just only your perspective, basically, and where you are coming from, right? So that's based from the knowledge angle. And I think this broadening your horizons also means that you're open to also hear about other ideas, right? Because I find that quite often when we argue and we have a kind of discussion or debate with someone, we already made up our mind, right, on basically what we think about this topic, right? Yeah. And so sometimes we say, oh yeah, I really understand what you're saying, but really I don't want to understand what you're saying, right? In a way, like, I mean, I don't want to change my mind, right? Yeah. I can see where you're coming from, but I don't want to change my mind, right? And so I think there's a lot to learn from being able to be flexible with whatever your attitude towards something is, right? And to kind of step down from your ego horse sometimes to just be open to also change your mind in an instant. If someone has a better idea, then we should go with that idea. Like forget about whatever crap I said just now, right? And so I think to have that flexibility, it's gonna save a lot of trouble in the future, basically, to just focus on, okay, so what is it right now that we're actually doing, rather than how do I look in terms of what we're doing, right? So really step out of your own ego and really focus on what actually matters, right? Because that will open up a whole new world for possibilities, I think, which is crucial, in my opinion, if you want to innovate, if you want to develop.
Yeah, I think that's a great one to end with. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I hope I didn't, blabber on too much about unnecessary stuff there.
We really want to thank you for participating in this interview and giving your own real honest questions. And yeah, thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you.
All right, take care.